Martin, how are things?
Okay, yeah. We've got Mark 13, 1 to 8 on Sunday, and Sunday is also Remembrance Sunday. Mark 13, 1 to 8 is the first part of the longest section of speaking from Jesus in Mark's Gospel, which I hadn't realised, but the longest passage of Jesus speaking to his disciples begins really about verse 5 and then carries on to the end of the chapter. And I suppose, sort of working backwards, as it were, thinking about how does that relate to Remembrance Sunday, and I was struck by the phrase in the passage where Jesus says to he's got very interestingly, he's got the 4 disciples who he started with him. So it's almost a kind of recapitulation going on here from the first 4 he called, who we heard about last week. And he is sitting down, so he's in judgment. And he says to them, don't be led astray and don't be alarmed. And it made me think, we remember the horrors of the First World War, the Second World War, and subsequent conflicts, and know there will be the horrors of future conflicts. And how do we hear those words, do not be alarmed and do not be led astray, in that context? And so then going back to Mark 13, if we understand Mark's Gospel to have been written down around the year 70, the reason Mark will have put together the accounts that he has of Jesus's ministry in this particular way is because they had resonance for the people at that time of his community. Now, whether you believe, as I would argue, that Mark was written in Rome, or whether you believe it was somewhere else around the Eastern Mediterranean, or even in Egypt, it's a context at that time of wars and rumours of wars. And of course, rumours of wars is exactly because it took a long time for messages to get through to it. Yeah. And so you've got conflict going on. There's also reference in this passage, the classic sort of threesome of conflict between nations, earthquakes and famine. And you get those three dimensions repeated in other literature of the time. Pliny, for example, talks about it. Josephus has the same 3 in his account of the Jerusalem revolt. And so you begin to get a sense of actually this is what was going on for people. There apparently were significant earthquakes. Well, in Pompeii and Herculaneum in 62, there was an earthquake in Jerusalem in 68. This is part of the. So Jesus is saying, at the time he said it, and then resonating for the people listening to Mark's Gospel at 70 or whenever, they're saying, okay, so this is happening now. We're in this situation of conflict, the Jewish revolt, for example, or we're in this situation of earthquakes or famine. And is this the end time? And Jesus saying, do not be alarmed, do not be led astray. And I'm struck, taking it to our own circumstance, the way in which we, I know my own life, and I'm sure others have the same experience. We give deep significance, ultimate significance in a sense, to events that are coming up. Things that we're dreading happening or really not looking forward to, and they kind of grow and grow and grow in our minds, like wars and rumours of wars and that, and it's almost paralyzes us in terms of actually responding. And I create my own deadlines, and they, the quality of death about those deadlines is quite high sometimes. I think, oh no, I can't. I'm dreading this happening, and to hear again those same words: "Do not be led astray, do not be alarmed." That enables us then to work with and through those experiences. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. As you're speaking, I'm thinking of Shunryu Suzuki, that well-known Buddhist writer who took Zen Buddhism to the Western United States in the 1960s. And he was asked, what's the essence of Zen Buddhism? What's the essence of Zen Buddhism? And he said, everything changes. So he said, everything changes. And there's something about that in what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, do not be afraid. And he's saying, you see this massive temple. Mm-hmm. I mean, and this was incredible, the building of the temple, which they imagined when the Messiah comes would be reinforced. Mm-hmm. Not one stone will be left on top of another. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is arguably Jesus at his Zen Buddhist kind of, moment. But I think there's something more than Zen in here, because, immediately you've got to ask the question, well, what is it that endures then? Mm-hmm. What is it that endures? Yeah. And actually, the history of Israel is a remarkable history in terms of, noticing what has not endured. I mean, we think of the American Empire 100 years as being, solid and pretty big, or China as it's emerging, but they are nothing as compared to the Egyptian Empire of 10,000 years, mm-hmm. which yet in God's promises and the prophets suggesting that somehow they will be freed of the shackles of that, which is surely going to go on and on forever. No. So what is it that endures? And while it's not explicitly stated in the passage, I do wonder if trundling along in the background here is, as usual in Mark, this notion of the kingdom. Mm-hmm. It's the kingdom of God that actually endures here. Yeah. And it seems we're not to confuse the temple, or perhaps even the church, mm-hmm. with the kingdom, because these will be things that actually come and go. And in the midst of all this, be prepared, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, for suffering and difficulty, because what is also going on through this time is enduring human sinfulness. Mm-hmm. And in particular, and while there is an angle of this which is historical, there's also something here about the little flock that is going to be particularly persecuted, isn't there? And why are Christians in particular going to be persecuted? Well, because they stick out like a sore thumb. In a world where religion is about sacrificing to the gods in order to appease them, the notion of a God coming to us and sacrificing himself out of love for us is as nonsensical as to be regarded as atheistic. And therefore beyond the pale. And their topsy-turvy notions that we were talking about on Saturday, on our Luke day, of the notions of the kingdom, immediately makes them stick out like a sore thumb. So what is enduring here? The kingdom. So don't be afraid, and be prepared for the fact that what you will be going through and the ups and downs will be very difficult on the way to the realization of that.
Absolutely. And that, which is how the passage continues, because it gets very focused on what will happen to individuals and to communities.
Yeah, but a complicated passage. Tom Wright, the New Testament scholar, reckons Mark 13 is probably the most complicated and challenging of chapters in the New Testament.
So our little efforts to try and simplify it
a little.
Thank you.